Call to order at 9:33 a.m. And in terms of adopting the agenda, motion 2025-072 resolved that the SSEA Joint Municipal Service Board approves the meeting agenda dated December 3rd, 2025. Moved by Suzanne, seconded by Barry. All those in favor? Perfect. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Okay, no past minutes, no source protection, so we will move directly to the presentation. We don't put it on. Do I put it on the floor first?
No, we could just, yes, we have Brian from StrategyCorp and Ed online, and take it away.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, Brian Teefy here. I'm a vice president at StrategyCorp. To work in our government relations and management consulting, work in the municipal sector, different agencies across the municipal and broader public sector. And I'll let my colleague Ed, who's there, just say, we can't see him anymore, but Ed, you want to say a quick hi?
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be able to join you and have this discussion. I appreciated the opportunity to collaborate with staff and those in the municipalities that have been able to engage with some conversations about both this funding formula and the nature of the relationship you have with SSEA. So I look forward to the next hour and a half or so. Thanks.
So what Ed and I wanted to do today was just our objective is to provide the board and everyone here with some of our research and thought process to date. Really get a input from you, feedback from you as we go and finish the project. In some ways, sort of the end of this meeting will be the halfway point. And what we want to do is take the information we have. We want to do a little bit more research, number crunching, and come back to you with a couple options. Make sure you guys know the pros and cons of those options so that SSEA has a good direction to continue this work and sure they provide good value for your money and good service as you move forward. If you want to flip maybe just to one more slide left. So some of the things we've done already to date, we've done a review of your letter of agreement. We'll touch briefly on that, but I won't spend too much time on that today. We've done a line-by-line review, provided some edits to the staff. Staff provided some helpful ideas and thoughts on that, and we're going to clean that up and provide a nice red line summary of that to the board members for your review. I think a lot of it, we'll talk about it a bit later, but a lot of administrative changes to just align it with best governance practices of today, and just making sure it aligns with the way the work actually gets done by the board and by the executive director in relation to your objectives and to your and to the communication back to the municipalities as well. Done a number of CAO interviews. I think we've talked to every CAO. We've also talked to a couple of board members, and MyNet's contact information is at the end of this deck in your material. So if you haven't had a chance to talk to you and you want to give us some ideas or ask us some questions after this meeting as well, feel free to reach out. We can schedule that meeting and take your input. It'd be great to get that done in December if we can, if your schedules allow. Third thing we've done, which Ed will get into a little bit, is a data review and looking at a couple different options for funding formula model development. So I want to take a bit of time to walk you through a couple slides on that and our thinking, and answer any of your questions and taking your advice. I'll be taking notes as Ed walks through some of the data points and the funding formula thoughts to take that back as we continue our work. So with that, maybe we'll go to the next slide. I'll turn it over to Ed just to walk through a couple slides here. Ed?
Sure. Thank you. So good morning again, everyone. This is a summary of the analysis that we've done and discussed with staff, as well as your CIOs through the conversations, at least conceptually, because in the context of the objectives for a funding formula, there are some criteria that we've compared these options against, and you see them at the top of the slide. We looked and recognizing that these are all in the eye of the beholder somewhat. There's some subjective elements to them for sure, but broadly, we would find that the ideal formulas or the options for them, are the ones that represent these criteria: fairness, predictability, affordability, and transparency. And fairness in our context means that you've got an understanding of the balance between the services you're receiving and the costs that you're incurring. From a predictability perspective, you want some assurance that these fees will stay reasonably consistent period over period. And they may fluctuate for various reasons, but those would be reasons you would understand and could anticipate. And from an affordability perspective, that is truly a subjective judgment about your capacity to pay and the competing priorities that you're all navigating, for sure, as well as the sustainable program requirements that SSEA is trying to manage. And so ensuring that there is both a view to efficiency and a view to outcome in the context of understanding affordability. And then from a transparency perspective, kind of wraps up those three criteria into a conversation about whether you can see those elements in the results that you're getting and in the invoices you're being asked to pay. And so those four factors influence our evaluation of the options that we've identified. And the options we identified are described in the bottom part of this slide. I'll just briefly summarize. The current funding formula is a legitimate choice. It's worked for a number of years. You may have opinions about its effectiveness, but it's straightforward and it navigates the conversations about fairness and predictability and affordability in a straightforward way. Again, different opinions about how well it does that are certainly legitimate, but it's an option for your consideration. And from the perspective of those four criteria, it is obviously one that you can anticipate, so it's predictable, and arguably also represents a good fairness option as well. An alternative would be to simply take the MPAC assessed property values across your communities and allocate costs according to the share of MPAC values associated with your communities. This is even more straightforward, so very predictable. Questions about affordability certainly come into the conversation, and whether property values are what drive SSEA's services is also a fair question. And so whether this is a truly fair approach from the perspective of matching services with benefits and costs is a legitimate conversation. But it is straightforward and it is reasonably transparent. An alternative, and one that we have some experience with, is taking those assessed values and then assigning SSEA's costs to a basket of services that would be recognizable to you as a consumer of them, and putting a price to those services and then applying costs according to how much of each of those services you use. So this is much like most service businesses that you would see. You pay a flat fee and then you pay an amount for what you use, and that usage will go up or down. So less predictable perhaps than some of the other options, but fair for sure, and easy to understand, so transparent. And then the activity-based approach ignores the flat fee portion of the conversation that we've been talking about so far and says everything is driven by your use. And so we would identify SSEA services, put a price to each one based on the units of service that each of you could purchase in a year based on SSEA's capacity to deliver them. And then your usage would determine how much you pay. So not necessarily very predictable. Whether it's affordable or not depends on how much you use the service and your budget's capacity to manage those. But very fair, certainly, and very easy to understand, very transparent. So those options were the focus of our conversation. And if I could ask someone to take us to the next slide. Thank you. Talk a little bit more about the current funding formula, because introducing the idea of bringing a basket of services to SSEA's budget conversations and putting prices to those does require some different thinking than what's been applied in the past, something that we have some good experience with. But from a maintenance perspective, it does require additional administrative effort to maintain. And so that prompts us to go back to the current funding formula. And how could we make this formula more effective? We can certainly identify those services and their performance costs, but we can bring other information into the conversation about outcomes and SSEA's service efforts and help you bridge the understanding between the costs that you're paying and the results that SSEA is delivering. And so this slide highlights that where you have a current funding formula that you've got in use and have had for a long time, there are some adjustments you could make that supplement the information it offers and matches with some administrative efficiency, some of the benefits of the activity-based allocation options that I was just describing for probably a lot less effort. So we think this is also a legitimate choice, but of course, interested in your perspectives on whether that is in fact a line of discussion to pursue. Have the next slide, please. And what we've got here is just a reminder of the context that we're working with and the cost shares. So we've done some modeling and looked at some of those examples that I was just describing to see what kinds of swings might exist if there was a different approach to allocating costs. And what we've anticipated is we want a relatively stable model going forward. That is, to whatever degree there are some understandings about what these costs are, we can supplement performance information with the financial reporting to give you a fuller picture of the results that SSEA is producing and use a funding formula that doesn't create big swings in costs. So not one or two municipalities that see significant reductions at the expense of one or two or more other municipalities that see significant increases. Again, if there is a willingness among the members to entertain those kinds of swings, we can talk about what phase-in period might be reasonable to smooth them out. But we're working on the premise that we want to keep any big swings in check with a new funding formula, if there was one to be adopted. Have the next slide, please. So I think I'll turn it back over to Brian now, but just in context for the funding discussion, we understand every dollar matters, and we want to create more transparency, accountability, and clarity with the formula that we would recommend. We've got good options here, and I believe your existing formula with some adjustments to account for other information is one of those. So at the appropriate time, I'd be interested in your perspectives on that. So thank you for listening. Mr. Teefy, back to you.
Thanks, Ed. And I think just one thing on the funding piece that I wanted to mention is, whether it's if there's a new model chosen, there may be a phase-in element to that. But also, if you're thinking about the activity-based approaches, one thing you need to think about is that is additional administrative work, as Ed mentioned. And there's, even with the existing framework, there could be some benefit to doing that and just helping the board and the staff understand what are the cost drivers of each of those activities. How do we, work to maintain those, from an effective and efficiency perspectives going forward. There could be some benefit in doing that, but that'll take some time as well. And, in the short term, a little bit of investment, rethinking how reports are done and how activities are categorized so that they can be aligned with the financials. So there's some work there. Quickly on the letter of agreement, because I know you have questions, especially on the funding piece. Just some of the categories we looked at upgrading on that were around the memberships and the parties, clearing that up for public consumption, clarifying the role of the treasurer, financial administration. As I mentioned, they're set updating governance and procedures. So there's pieces around how to vote and using electronic meetings and just making sure that's aligned with the realities of today in the letter of agreement. some planning and reporting pieces, accountability shifts for the executive director and board to align with how it works now and how it is effective. And then regulatory and donation compliance that's just shifting based on updated legislation. On the next slide, so we really want to, this is an important, obviously, point in the process. Based on input here, we want to go back, further develop the funding formula options, finalize those letter of agreement updates so you can review that. The goal is to have that back to you before the holiday break, so you have some reading material over the break time we have, and then provide that final report, final draft report to the board for review in the new year. I'll pause there. Ed, I don't know if you have any final closing comments before we get into our discussion.
Thank you. I don't think so. Other than I'll just remind the board that in the context of any funding formula option, at the end of the day, these are allocations, and so none of this is an exact science. But what we're really shooting for is a formula that makes sense, that's easy to understand, ideally easy to administer, and is generally accepted. So with that, I'd be happy to address any specific questions members have. Thank you.
And just keep in mind too that you look at the folks doing the Zumba there and playing ping pong, those activities that are put on by the municipality and the municipal spot are perhaps saving the province money in the hospital, right? They're staying active, staying fit. It's the same, the work that SSEA does with your guidance is helping, maintain the environmental health, and that's not necessarily saving the municipality money directly in some ways. In some cases, it's saving a landowner money from thoughtful, proactive information, or it's saving work in one municipality, maybe saving another municipality an environmental issue, just depending on water flow and all of that. So it's a challenging thing to wrap our heads around and make sure it's effective. And I think different trade-offs you have to consider with these options. So with that, just open up to questions. Feel free to fire off any questions or advice. It'll be helpful as we keep moving forward on this.
Yeah, but just a question, how did you arrive the overall scoring there? I guess if you say the current one's 3, so how do you arrive at that?
That's judgment based on our assessment of those, again, subjective criteria, but the premise for the existing formula looking reasonable relative to these options is it's been tested over time, and it is relatively straightforward to understand. So supplement it with some other information that might address the shortcomings it brings into the conversation, and we think you could keep using it if you were interested in doing so.
So I don't know what we're I guess we're just gonna hop into it. I have some concerns over activity-based funding. Now, the reason I have that is, how is it controlled? Is it based on what this board deems as required activity, or is it based on the municipality? And the reason I ask that is because if the municipality that's, if let's say it's an upriver situation, decides not to do something about that activity, it's the people or municipalities downriver that are going to be left in a lurch, if you will, because of inactivity elsewhere. Which is why I think that the whole model was built, because there's no real municipal borders in the watershed. Further to that, and this is something that I recently learned, so I apologize to my teachers for using it, I guess, in a weaponized fashion. But from a fairness model, Tiny Township has been, I would say, overfunding based on the impact assessments and property portions of things, because a lot of our population density actually falls outside of the Severn Sound watershed. We just included them because we want to be able to utilize those resources, but there's no western shore of Tiny is not part of the watershed. A lot of our population and properties are in that section. So if we were going to be doing a reassessment or reevaluation of the funding model, I think Tiny would be very, I would say, okay, we're more interested in just funding our watershed portion then, which would, you'd see the drop in the number of properties serviced. The impact value would go way down because it's our western shore. And now we're looking at a fair model again. That's not what I, as a representative, want. But I just wanted there as consideration that we, like, this has been working. We've seen I guess a third party analysis that shows that we are working under a fairly fair model. We both had the 3 score out of 4. So if there were tweaks, I actually would like to see the tweaks in that existing model. If we were going to an activity based or a property based with higher emphasis on impacted properties, I think Tiny Township would have a very, I don't know, real concern about fairness in that regard, because a lot of the watershed, well, a lot of Tiny is not in the watershed. So that's my initial comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. Other questions, comments? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Councillor Marchand, town of Penetanguishene. So a couple things. I think, so I've gone through this, I've gone back to the report a few times just to get my head around, you know, how do you come up with some kind of model to say what's working, what's not working? It's not just about dollars and cents and services. And I think that was a piece that I was, you know, as I went through this report, and kind of taking a step back to say that collectively, when this agreement was pulled together, it really was fundamentally about having some fairness, predictability, affordability, and transparency across all municipalities within the watershed. And so I really did appreciate the criteria that was used. And I think there'll be some, you know, back and forth on whether this was truly the right criteria, but in the spirit and the sense of this agreement between the municipalities, this to me really echoes what was established back in 2019 when this partnership was created. And I think that's an important piece that we can't lose sight of from that perspective, which is really important to me. And so I wasn't surprised that one of the recommendation was that the current model is that there is feasibility, fairness, predictability, affordability, and transparency in this model. Is there an opportunity to improve? And yeah, that we've seen those pieces, and I think that's important. And this is what I was hoping to see, that the current model has value. There is those components, and perhaps we need to spend some time on, you know, cleaning up the language, tightening a few things up, and making sure that everyone within the partnership feels heard, collective, and that we're all on the same page. The piece for me around, you know, so when we go to the slide that does the comparison, I went right to implications because those are cost implications as well. We also have an organization that runs very lean. You know, we're grateful for TAY to be the HR payroll administrating municipality that helps offset a significant amount of costs. Some of the proposals around kind of these implications, you know, when we just talk about activity based, like, how are we funding those? Who's coming up with that? How are we managing it? This is adding a lot of additional work. Somebody's got to do this work, and this means either more staff, we streamline things, but we can't lose sight of the additional implications, which often are those administrative, financial, those calculation pieces that may mean another individual within the organization to be able to track, report, and ensure that we're sustaining that and that we're able to really accurately track it in a affordable, transparent, and a fair way, right? If we keep going back to those criteria. So that is the one piece that when I look at some of the options, and there is going to be a considerable amount of work, I think, that will be involved in that. And so just not losing sight of that, because that was a piece that I honestly really kind of kept coming back to. So So those are just my comments in terms of the rating itself. And I am supportive of the current model. I do, I appreciate that some work has been done around the actual agreement itself, around the governance piece, getting that cleaned up and ensuring we're being consistent and staying on top of that as well. So my comments really are to continue, I think, to look at the current model and doing some cleanup and tightening. That would be, in spirit of why we've come together to do this and continue to do this work collectively as a group of municipalities. So those are just my comments.
Barry, you look like you're about to say something.
I always got something to say.
I figured you would, so.
So, and I'm gonna jump on just with what Steffen's saying. We're called the watershed, and I think that's where conservation authorities, they're changing it all, so it's all things. And I don't disagree. We're all part of this watershed. Who pays what is the question, I think, and I think that's even what, not to jump on Georgian Bay here, but I think that's where a lot of other questions came in. So just on the formula, so I don't know what other formulas are out there, to be honest, and I think that's where we're going. We thought we did have a good one. So I guess that's one of my questions, why pick this particular funding formula? Is there other formulas out there that work worse or better or whatever? That would be the one question. The second part, so based on the charts and that, I think the assessment was all based on 2009. Or is it all 2007? So we've used the same assessment again. So we haven't updated that. So I think that needs to be updated. I think we can get to 2016, 2021.
So I'm gonna pass it to Julie, because she can update you on that information, and then I'll put it over to Emma.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Absolutely. Barry, we have been prepared to do that. Your CAOs have asked us to do that in the past.
Yeah.
But we need everybody's data to do that, and we have not been able to get access to Georgian Bay Township's MPAC data. We have not had permission from MPAC or Georgian Bay to do that. So we can't update everybody but one municipality. So if we could clearly do that, that has been brought up by the consultant as well, that we're working on old data, but we would need to revisit and retry with support from Georgian Bay Township and the District of Muskoka to release that data.
Can we get that, Peter?
I'm making a note as we.
I just find that strange.
Yeah.
In this day and age, and I'm not being critical, I just, too bad, I don't care what Georgian Bay says.
And
That's provincially regulated and transparency and everything else, but anyhow.
I think there's rules around the way MPAC releases data, and that's the challenge, right? MPAC can release data to the municipality, not to us.
So Councillor Gratiano is going to chime in here on this. Our planning department attempted to contact MPAC to get data in regards to a study that they were doing, and it's taken them years and they have yet to receive it. So regardless of who's responsible for owning that data, MPAC will not release it. And just an FYI.
Okay, so just to touch on that, will you be coming back? Say we have to tweak the funding formula. Say 50% back to the partners, 50% based on assessment of property value. I'm not sure, because like I say, we're all part of the watershed. But I think that's all I kind of got.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Ed, did you have any comments on that?
Well, all I would say is in the context of navigating an adjustment to these or some other funding formula, we can certainly make anything work. We may need to make some assumptions about any gaps in the data, and you may need to be willing to accept some risk that the actual data could be different from what the model that we would come up with illustrates. But in this context, your question about, why these options, we really use those criteria as the jumping off point. So if you wanted a model that represented those criteria, what would it look like? Because you could just say everybody pays an equal share, and that's the very simple and straightforward approach. Is it affordable? Is it fair? Maybe not. So, I mean, there are other options, of course. You can slice this any number of ways, but getting to a decision point and bringing you into a conversation that allows these principles to be tested and to, to understand what reasonable could look like, we felt like these were a good foundation for the discussion. I appreciate the observations about the activity-based implications. There are additional administrative requirements for something like that. The benefit is you get more insights into how the work gets done. And so if that's important to you, maybe those additional costs are worthwhile, but maybe not. And perhaps instead you would accept a formula that is a little more general, but also easier to administer. So the availability of impact data certainly is a factor. We can do our best to work around gaps if that's what you wanted us to do, and we could explain how we did that so you could understand what the risks of relying on that information looks like. Nevertheless, and any model will require some judgment. And so, how much judgment and how willing are you to accept the potential that actual data could vary potentially significantly from the inputs to that model are really discussions about risk that you need to be comfortable with.
Just quickly before, Brian, did you have anything to add? Any follow-up, Barry, or does that kind of? Oh,
Well, I think, just to go back, I think we need to see some of these different charts in which if we went 100% amongst the partners, here's your cost. I mean, it's all coming back down to cost. That's how I see it.
Lori, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I think, I'm sitting and listening to the conversation, and I think we need to go back to the reason why we began on this particular journey. And I think it was a lot of discussion around how do we quantify the work that gets done and the cost to us. So, I'm pleased to see that our current model is, sound and working well. Whereas the third option, which is a rating of 3, also can potentially give us those greater insights to be able to promote to our municipalities as to what the value is for the money that we're spending. So I think that's the conundrum here. Do we probably have to spend a bit more money to get that data, to provide that info? But so what's the value of having that versus what it is that we would have to spend in order to amend?
Thank you, Lori. Go ahead, Steph.
Through you, Madam Chair. Another thing just thought of now that I would have concerns of with an activity-based model, there would be some significant fluctuations in year-over-year budgeting. And we all know how councils react to percentage changes, where one year it could be in a negative percentage, I guess, but the following year, depending on where the activity is located within the watershed, it could be as high as 20-25%. And I mean, everybody has a hard time wrapping their heads around percentages versus dollar value on these things. I think it would be a very tough sell at the council tables as well if you see those kind of variations. I thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ryan or Ed, can you just explain what you would mean by tweak, like adding to or supplementing the existing? So if you stayed with the existing, what are your recommendations about enhancing the existing formula?
Thanks for the question. So,
Go ahead.
sorry, I could offer some suggestions. Ultimately, these two form some administrative work that might not be occurring today, but as it relates to the formula, they're, in my opinion, simpler to navigate and manage. So you would use your existing formula and augment it with routine reporting to councils, to the board, of course, and to councils that describes the service efforts and the results SSEA is producing throughout the year. So In one scenario that I'm talking about, you would have eyes on an annual work plan that illustrated in some detail where the resources SSEA's got would be used throughout the year and what the expected results it's going to produce looks like at the beginning of the year. That might form part of your budget deliberations, for example. Then, say, on a quarterly basis, you would get a report from Julie that illustrates what's been happening in the year to date. And that would include some key performance indicators, that would include some narratives about the work that's been done. So again, that value connection to the costs you're incurring is easier to see and consistently available. So you don't need to do much to dig into this information to understand those connections, and you can decide whether the value is there or not based on this information. So this is, in a local government context, a fairly normal part of routine accountability reporting. And it would be easy to emulate, I think, into SSEA's context. And so that would be one approach you could take that is tested and that has a lot of examples associated with it to see just how it would work in your context. And from your perspective as councils, you may have some local experience in your communities with that kind of information as well. But it really just involves providing more information about what the connections between the budget you've approved, the results that are being generated, and where the benefits are being realized that would augment the existing funding formula and allow you to make those value assessments. So that's one approach, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and the areas Ed was explaining, slide 5 kind of contextualizes them under the areas to explore in the current model. So periodic formula reviews, introducing some level of activity-based costing. Maybe I think there's levels of that, right? So there's activity-based costing that is helpful for your understanding of the costs, but may not be detailed enough to implement an activity-based model for pay. So there's degrees of that. And then, as Ed was mentioning, the annual performance and just annual briefings and workshops to try and tie the KPIs and the updates that the SSEA team puts together now, tie that to the costs, and knit that together a little bit. So when you're seeing those updates, you see how that's impacting the cost of the organization over the course of the year on a quarterly basis, as Ed said. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
I appreciate that. I think what I'm really concerned with is we sit in these roles to represent our municipalities. We come together quarterly and we get extensive packages of information at this table. And if we are not, as the delegated authorities for our municipalities, bringing that back and sharing the good news at our council tables about all the work and the effort, and I'm going to kick the hornet's nest because there was astonishing and a significant amount of work that gets done, and it's part of our council information package. It's there. The whole package gets put out for council to review, whether they read it or not. I make sure that I ask to pull it out because I want to comment. Last meeting, I commented on $500,000 of grant funding that was written and received for this organization. That is huge and that's significant. It was in the delegation when I delegated on behalf of SSEA to Tiny. There's so much information. We have a job and a role to make sure that we're getting that back at our council tables, and then we're identifying the value that the SSEA is bringing. And so we get a copious amount of information at this table on a quarterly basis. We've updated to infographics that are easy to share with council. If anything, we pull that out. We talk about a few highlights. That is something that I make sure that I do because that's my responsibility as the council member for the town of Penetanguishene sitting on this board. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, but there's already a lot of really great information, and we have a responsibility to really champion this work. It's not about defending every year at budget time. We didn't have a delegation by the SSEA. There was no qualms. We saw the budget line. We have regular reports and updates. I'm proud of being a representative at this table in our partnership. And it was passed with, I shouldn't, wait, it's next week, we go to final budget approval. However, those are the things that are really important, and we have an obligation and a responsibility, and it's to be champions of this partnership and this work. And I think that's important. And so I'm just going to add that because there's a lot of really great work that's already there. So if it's to align it more with KPIs or put a dollar value beside it, because it just seems to be, we're so hung up on the dollar value of this. Because I think if the other piece were to go to what's going on in terms of the new regions and conservation authorities, and you want to see a cost by side analysis to make sure ours is cheaper than that, that might be what needs to happen to appease certain members in terms of the costing, because we're so hung up on just the costing itself. And that's, I'm just gonna.
Bill?
Yeah, sure.
Speak, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So the current model, we're just justifying, information that we've received, like to Suzanne, Councillor Marchand's point. We do get a world of information, so I don't see, if that's the only thing that's changing on the current model of more quarterly reports to justify it, the spend, then I think we're already there. I don't know how many more reports we can get from you, information, but if we need certain things answered, you're always there. Julie and the team are always there to answer. So if that's the only change to the current model, then hearing, correct me if I'm wrong. I would be interested in taking a look at the activity base with the impact properties and the number 3 choice. That's for sure. I would like to dive a little bit deeper on that. Unfortunately, the services that SSEA provides are wonderful. I will not deny that, but it does come back to costs, unfortunately, and that's why we go to budgets, and that's why we do this, right? So there is a cost to things, whether it's and I've mentioned this many a time, that there's going to become a point when the costs are rising so quickly that services will end up, we're going to have to dive into some services that we may not need, and maybe this activity-based impact properties and activity-based column may come into effect on that one, where some services, some municipalities just will say axe because of costs. And that's the only fear I have, is as one member drops out, and then if another member drops out, then the affordability, there's a question mark on that, right? So, and I don't want to see that happen. I think that this is very important, what SSEA does at great value, right? But at the end of the day, when you're sitting at the budget table, as we are right now, and in some municipalities, we're another week and a half, and with new council coming in and the costs of everything are rising, that something has to get cut. Actually, and that's what budgeting is all about. And I don't want to see the SSE suffer another blow of having another member, walk away. So those are my only comments, but I would like to see the activity based a little bit. And I get what Councillor Walma was saying, but just to have that information in front of us would be good to see. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. So I'm just gonna have a quick comment, and then we can open it up for everyone else as well. So I do think with the current model, I feel like much of the conversation around this table has been around lack of transparency. And I don't think it's so much that staff is withholding information, it's just sometimes hard to explain. And while I completely agree, I don't think we need any more staff reports, because you guys do a lot. You're very good at keeping the group up to date. But I do feel if we could have some KPIs, which are those 1-page, very easy to show council, because as much as we can let our council know what's going on, some people are not, they don't understand. I being one of them, it took me a long time to understand the science base of what we do and the value that was brought. When you have those key performance indicators that you can throw up and there's numbers beside it. So is that something, given knowing that those aren't easy to come up with? Is that something, if we look, I think what I'm hearing is we're probably going to potentially look at option 1 and 3. That's kind of what I'm hearing around the table. Not saying that's the answer, but that's kind of where it sounds like. If we are looking at KPIs, is that something that you guys can come back to us with in terms of developing? Because once you have them developed, it's not, I'm not saying it's not work, but it's not, the work is in developing how those KPIs are written, not just adding. Like, obviously it is going to be work with Julie and the team, but quarterly to add those. And those are quick, easy things we can show our councils. And I think it's very important to note this is a long-term project. Obviously we want this organization to be around for a long time. And as much as some of us may sit on councils that are very supportive right now, we have no idea what's happening next term. And what could be going over great, we may be running into, to Bill's point with budget, there's a lot of things where you don't know who's going to be on that council. So I want to make sure that we are looking at the whole picture. So just quickly, is developing the KPI something that you guys can help with?
If we're looking at the option 1 and 3, we can we've already worked with the team to talk about their activities and help us understand the different activities. KPIs would be, and I don't think it's necessarily more work. It's maybe just shifting a little bit of the current updates to align that with the budget a little bit more. The other piece I'll just notice that, building this out doesn't necessarily mean, the activity-based KPI modeling can be, can inform the funding model, or it can just inform the work,
Yes.
right? So there's still that choice there. And you may have something to add on that as well.
Well, just to answer the question simply, yes, we can absolutely identify some indicators that facilitate both quarterly and annual reporting. This is an area of expertise we have, not necessarily related to SSEA, but the expertise we have is in developing those indicators. We can help.
Lori, did you have your hand up? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, no, I put it up while you were speaking, Danielle. And I will have to agree with your comments. I really appreciate, Suzanne, what it is that you had to say. And I too make a real effort on painting the picture after we get our packages back to council. And I will say the infographic that was provided to us at the last one was very, very well received, but I think that's the journey we're on. How do we take that and supplement that so that it's even more digestible for council as they are making these financial decisions, because we have to be able to paint the picture very clearly as to how things connect with each other. And even though we come back with the package and talk about it, if you've got some straight bullet points that are, really targeted to what is meaningful for the other members of council and that they can clearly then connect the dots, I think that's the one piece that we're still missing. So if we can augment what it is we have been doing by some of these suggestions, such as KPIs, I'm all about it. I do think we need to explore that.
Yeah, just a comment through the chair. When we asked staff at Severn, they value the work that Severn Sound does. And the question is, if they didn't do it, what would it cost us if we hired from outside? So I think I've heard numbers 30, 50%, 100% more if we had to contract it out to outside agencies. So I think we should promote, we as SSEA promote what we do, and it's saving our township a lot of money, not having to go out and get consultants. We have a quick phone call and we get it answered by Severn Sounds.
Right. Go ahead, Steph.
Some of these things are gonna come off as negatives. That is not my intent. What I'm just talking about, because you don't know who's coming in next. I can tell you that in Tiny, you have very interesting political dynamic. All So, yeah, it's a wild card. So sellability is a huge component of this. I can tell you if and when we get the updated impact models, I guarantee tiny share is gonna go up. It's just, shoreline development, it's been huge. So there's gonna be some, and like I said, even if it was the existing model has that impact assessment in it, that's fine. So you're gonna see growth in tiny share. But if we're talking about a fairness factor, things that also have to be considered outside of this model is that any board that I've ever sat on, county, municipalities, all that kind of stuff, there's a tiny township is paying 30% of the bill and we have 12% of the vote. So there, if we're looking at the funding, I also want to look at the governance aspect of things as well.
Very interesting point.
And I think that 30% will go higher.
Do we have any other comments, questions?
I agree.
So from a direction perspective, we do have to provide direction in order, I think, to kind of do a bit deeper of a dive in one or two of these options. Are we comfortable with the current and option 3? I don't wanna, because that's just kind of the feeling I'm getting around the table. But I don't want to just make that decision. It's not my decision, but what we're gonna do on the floor. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Just for clarity, is the impact/property plus activity based being number 3 on slide?
Sorry, yes, that's what I'm assuming. I'm
Okay,
assuming the
sorry.
first one is the current, just
Perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because I support that if that's the providing that direction. Sure.
any other comments? Would someone prefer to see something different? Just want to make sure we're having a fulsome discussion here. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Going back to the impact assessment piece. So effectively, we've approved our 2025 model or budget, 2026 budget that's before our councils based on one less partner. If we have the impact information for all the other partners and that partner is no longer active in here, do we proceed? Is that a responsible thing to do? Is that something that we honestly need to consider? I'm going to call the elephant in the room, but that is the reality that we're sitting with as a board of directors, having one less member effective January 1st, 2026. And that budget reflects that. So I don't want to not see people come back in. That is not my intent. However, we are faced as a board to make some decisions based on our new model and structure. And I just don't, like, if that information is already available, not that I want to see it go up for Tiny or for anybody. However, you know, Verity raised a good point. And so is that something that we table and consider? I just think it needs to be put out there for conversation and some consideration.
I did watch the Georgian Bay discussion on this, and I think there's a chance they would come back, but they're kind of hoping that this project might convince them to come back. So I don't want to throw a curve at you there. I can't see how it's hard not to get impact because your taxes are based on impact.
I was just gonna say, right now, we can do both. Like, we can,
Yeah.
so I would love to see exactly what you're saying. Let's get the updated numbers with impact 2016? And extrapolate what that'll look like. Because Georgian Bay is the only one withholding, so we can see what that does to the remaining 7 partners, absolutely. Very excited about that. So yeah, I think that's, like I said, the model was fair before. I think obviously if we're gonna stick to the model would be, in my opinion, as a voting member from Tiny, still fair. Like that's me. But if we're looking, and I'm happy to see the information, but I have some serious concerns over option number 3. And like I said, happy to flesh it out a bit more.
Barry?
And I think that's where I'm going back, because we know the assessments are gonna change. There's no question about it, and that's where I'm suggesting. Can we get some other different factors in there? Say it's based at 50% amongst the 7, 8 partners, however that goes, how that changes the actual dollar figure. Second to that, if the province turned around and mandated that every household pays $100, that takes it right off the board. Or if the province stepped up to it and again starts funding it. It affects everybody, but you know, here we are as our local municipalities getting dinged by the province, you pay. But you're not gonna change that.
Well,
No.
If follow up, and again, this is like, I just want to say that I know we're doing the relook and we're looking at the impact model, and I honestly, I still think it's fair, and I think Tiny has been happy with the way things have been going. But I do want to point out that for individual municipalities that are concerned about funding, that I believe Tiny has been propping that funding model up, because a lot of our assessment is not even in the watershed. So this is where we talk about fairness, and I'd be actually interested if we is it easy for us or our consultants to flesh out exactly how much of that properties and assessment is not incorporated in the actual watershed? If not, I can get my staff to do it. I'm just saying, if we're looking at all pieces and the fairness model, I don't.
Yeah.
I know it's my job as Tiny to make sure we're not being taken advantage of at the same time.
Okay. And I think it's an important point. I think with respect to Georgian Bay, I think a decision, I don't want to misspeak, but I think a decision is like it's gonna be back on your table. Obviously, we're not having answers, but by the time that decision is back on your table, we just are providing more direction, so we have, as you spoke, we can get the impact, we can get kind of some of those dollar numbers, so we can do some comparisons, and if Georgian Bay does decide that they want to stay, we're not getting that information before then anyway, so we could add it in if required, and if not, then they're not staying, so we need to look at how we regardless, I think we need the option of how we currently sit right now with 7, like without Georgian Bay, and if they decide that they're interested and they want to stay and they can provide the information, then we could maybe have a supplement as well. But I think as of right now, that's the key piece, is what it looks like moving forward with out now. Go ahead, Suzanne.
I think it's irresponsible if we don't look at it. I really do. I have concerns that if we don't look at whether it's option A with 7, option B with 8. But the reality around this table has board members. Into 2026, we have a budget that reflects 7 members, and we have to be responsible in ensuring that this next one or this approach may have option A 7, option B with 8. I think we'd be doing a disservice, and next year there could be a whole different group of individuals sitting around this table potentially by this time next year. So I think I do think we have an obligation to our current work to make sure that that's reflected.
Bill?
And thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So the direction that I'm getting at is option 1 and 3, get information on that. To Councillor Walma's point, with properties that aren't in the water shed, to take them out of the equation to see what that looks like. And then as with 7 partners, is that the kind of the direction? And then with the 2016 updated impact figures. Are those kind of the 4 points that we're kind of looking at?
I think so. I think, I don't know if it's per se the direction piece, but I would like to see some of the KPI
And
potential
KPIs,
background,
yes.
just because I feel like that's an easy way to sell the work.
Yeah, and I would, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And I would agree with the KPIs and making it simple, easy to understand. For council, to your point earlier. But I would be happy with all those points. Some good conversation today too, so which is awesome. Okay, yeah.
Does that provide direction,
Yeah.
enough direction for yourself?
Yeah, I think the question just on the 2016 data, we'll have to just work with the municipalities, CAOs, I guess, to get that data for everyone, so if we can get that in a timely fashion, that would be helpful on that piece. The other pieces, I think we can work on, I think should be a way to slice the in watershed, out watershed numbers, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, on the impact, stuff, I think in the past, and, we'll double check after the meeting with Lex, I think we were on board with the seven, being able to access. So, I think we can work, with Brian and Ed to, work through that piece, if we can still, do that.
Okay. Question. I didn't do this. Do I have to do this and then go? Okay. Okay, okay, so,
Right now, there's nothing, right? So we would have to, well, but this is really too.
Well, this,
Yeah, funny, either one, we're gonna have to do a division, so if they're doing a revision for this, depending on the outcome, yes, I think push for something else.
no, I,
okay, so procedurally, we need to receive the presentation. So, motion 2025-073, resolved that the presentation regarding a progress update on the SSEA funding and governance review from StrategyCorp be received for information. Moved by Suzanne, seconded by Lori. All those in favor?
With
I don't think,
Can I speak to this? Yeah.
No, SSEA. Okay, so then, SSEA corporate administration updates. I'm gonna pass this to Julie quickly and
Thank you,
then,
Madam Chair. So I know we've had the discussion, we've had some direction that we can prepare a motion or here. But I want to direct you to the staff report you have in front of you. That has a project timeline. So we were also asking you to make sure you see the project timeline. We know that it's slightly out of tune with Georgian Bay Township's decision-making. But we wanted to put this in front of you so that you've seen it. Relative to when we've already done the kickoff with the consultant to implementation and planning. So the final report presentation expectation would be coming back to the January meeting with what you direct us with today and then implementing after that. So that I think should be part of the resolution. So I just bring that to your attention in the report.
okay, perfect. Is there any comments or questions for Julie on the timeline? No, I
January 20, when is our?
think it's 29.
29, end of the month. Okay, good. Later doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I just put it.
Yeah. All right, okay, so, staff report 43-25 SSCA, the SSCA agreement and funding formula third-party review, motion 2025-074, resolve that staff report number 43-25 SSCA regarding agreement and funding formula third-party review be received for information, and further that the board approves the project timeline as outlined in the staff report, and further that the board directs StrategyCorp to further pursue the following options 1 and 3. And further that final recommendations be brought to the Q4 2025, January 2026 board meeting. Moved by Steffen, seconded by Barry. All those in favor? Yep, yep. All right. Any announcements, correspondence, other business, anything else?
If I may,
Yes.
Madam Chair, thank you. We sent all of you the briefing note that also went to your CAOs to go to mayor and council around the Conservation Authority Act review. I shouldn't say the act review, the boundary review. We had noted that on the maps, there is no change and that the direction from the province was there'd be no change in boundary of CAs. Yet 3 municipalities were listed. So Severn, Tiny and Tay were listed within the supplementary documents as being part of the new Conservation Authority. Penetanguishene and Midland were not. But we included all of you in that, whether you were included or not, just so you could see the direction. And my understanding is the three CAOs from those municipalities have confirmed with the province that that was an error. And that in the final document, that those names should be, the township should be removed from the final. So I just wanted to do a quick update on that, but
Thank you.
my understanding is it will be, yes, and thank you to Tiny for providing direction to look further into that. But that I think most of your municipalities, that's going to be coming forward. I think most like December 10th on most of your, so at this point, it looks like it's been dealt with at the CAO level and it should be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, so for adjournment, a motion 2025-075, resolve that this meeting of the SSEA Board of Directors held December 3rd, 2025, adjourn at 10:39 a.m. to meet again January 29th, 2026, or at the call of the chair. Moved by Mark, seconded by Steph. All those in favor?